Welcome to our show today. We're happy to have Pastor Harold White with us, who represents the Seventh-day Adventists in Greater Sacramento. Harold, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Will you tell our audience about where you were born and raised and went to high school and parents and siblings and those kinds of things?
All right. I was born in a little town in Iowa, near Sioux City, a little town called Anthon, less than 1,000 people. I had a mom and dad, and my dad owned a garage, filling station, sold that, bought a grocery store, so I had the privilege of working in both as I grew up. I had 2 brothers and 1 sister, an older brother, a younger sister. I was the middle child. Woe is me, right? Enjoyed growing up in Anthon and never thought I'd leave. But then Uncle Sam got a hold of me, and I left and hardly have ever been back since. But I went to school in Anthon, Iowa, graduated in 1964, joined Uncle Sam for a 2-year stint because of the Vietnam thing, and then came back to that area but wasn't there for very long.
You and I are the same generation. I graduated in 1966. Do you remember the brand of fuel you pumped at the filling station?
Sinclair. 22.6 cents a gallon. And when it jumped up to 22.9, it was big news around town. That was a high-priced jump.
How about the grocery store? What was the highlight there?
The highlight there was that little town was too small for the 3rd grocery store, so it kind of went belly up. But it was a good experience for us all. We learned a lot, but it was fun. I really enjoyed the grocery store work. I actually went to work in another town at a grocery store after I graduated from high school.
Are your siblings still living?
Yes, my older brother's retired, coach and teacher. My youngest brother just retired, and my youngest daughter, my sister, she will retire from the post office soon.
So you were raised in a home where work was an honorable thing, and everybody pulled their own weight?
Yeah, I had 2 paper routes. I also worked in the movie theater, ran the projection machines. I also worked in a veterinarian shop, cleaned his messy office, and so that was it. Work and baseball, that was my life.
You and I are an awful lot alike. My older brother and I had a paper route in a town with 2 streets. He did the upper street and I did the lower street. The family dog would run alongside of me for some reason, maybe because I was the youngest. And we'd have a race to see who could get the newspapers delivered quickest. My father didn't appreciate if we put it in the rose bushes or on the roof, and we always had to go back to correct that.
In those days, you had to actually put it in the door for people. You didn't throw it. You actually went up and put it in their door.
Wow.
Yeah.
We were throwers, and I developed a pretty good baseball arm for throwing newspapers. Did you have a happy childhood?
Yes. Other than being sick quite a bit. I was pretty sick as a child, but other than that, fantastic childhood, really.
Have you enjoyed good health in adulthood?
Yeah. In fact, I've been a minister for 35 years, and I think I've probably missed 2 days because of sickness. That's remarkable.
That is.
Yeah.
How about a wife and children?
Yes, I'm happily married. As I tell everybody, my wife and I have been married for 86 years. 43 for her and 43 for me. And we have 3 children. Our daughter's married, just was back here from Illinois last week. We had a great time with her man and the little child, 6 years old, Caitlin. She wants to be called Katie now, so we learned that. And then I have 2 sons. Neither one of those are married. One lives in this area, going to school right now. The other one's in Texas, and it's kind of one of those tech-savvy guys that puts up big things that you do for PR, can't think of the word, public address systems and that kind of thing. Yeah.
We were talking earlier here at the studio about all of the techie things and the stuff that people know that I don't.
Yeah.
In your role as a grandfather, do you see that any different than in your role as a father?
Well, I see it different, and I know a lot more now. I wish I'd known then, but it's a lot different because I don't get to see her that often. That's the worst part of it, because distance is so far. But it's such a delight. It's so much fun. I think kids are smarter today than they've ever been.
I agree.
They just wise up so fast, and they just seem to know everything. So it's a whole lot of fun.
Did anybody warn you or tell you how much you'd love your children's children?
No, I heard that, but it's really real.
It's really a wonderful thing. So you've preached in other places besides Sacramento.
Mm-hmm.
Could you tell us about some of those, please?
I started in Nebraska. Actually went back to the church that I was baptized in. I became a Christian about 23 years of age, went to Union College in Lincoln, Nebraska, graduated, interned for a year there, and then they shipped me back to my home church, which was a unique experience. Pastored in Nebraska then, and then went to Kansas, went to Indianapolis, Indiana, went from there to southern Texas, 7 miles from the Mexico border. Went from there to upper state New York, back to Texas, Little Rock, Arkansas, and then here.
And how long have you been in Sacramento?
8 years.
And those churches in the Midwest, the Bible Belt, I presume?
Yeah, very much so.
And people take their religion serious?
Very much so. They were wonderful churches to pastor, except for the distance. Sometimes I had 2 churches, 50 miles apart, something like that. But yeah, wonderful people back there. And I could go back to any one of them and enjoy my time there again.
And are you in Sacramento now to stay?
Probably, getting to be the age that I am. I hope I don't have to move around too much more.
Will you retire here?
Probably. Yeah, you never know. It's Lord's will be done, but that's what I would hope, yeah.
Well, our community would be better off if you did stay here.
Well, thank you. That's nice of you.
Do you have hobbies and things in your spare time you like to pursue?
Well, I used to play a lot of ball, but I don't do that so much anymore for picnics and stuff. But my wife and I do a lot of walking. I still ride a unicycle.
Really?
Yeah, 2 or 3 times a week. I try to do that. I promised myself I was going to ride a unicycle still when I'm 70 years old.
And how old were you when you learned to do that?
Probably 12 or something like that.
Where did you find a unicycle?
My brother gave a unicycle. My oldest brother gave my other brother and myself a unicycle for Christmas, and we
And there
started.
you go.
Yeah.
We have a granddaughter who's 15 who's been riding a unicycle since she was about 10, and they have her ride it everywhere because nobody else can do that.
It's good exercise because there's no coasting, and there's only one gear.
I haven't thought about it that way. Do you find Sacramento a religious community?
I find it a religious community in that there's so many different faith groups here. I think it can always get better, of course. I found it not quite so religious one night as I was out for a walk and got mugged. That wasn't the best experience I've ever had, but I think because of all the different faith groups, there is a lot of religion that goes on here. And I think it's kind of a picture of what we really want to see, in that this country, I believe, was founded upon separation of church and state, giving freedom to religions to express their own beliefs, and we have a lot of that in Sacramento.
Do you have some part of the gospel that you're passionate about?
Prophecies. Prophecies was a thing that attracted my attention other than coming to know God. But prophecies thrill my soul when I see and hear and read how God, so many years in advance, knew what was going to happen and spoke through men to tell us what was going to happen. And then it actually is fulfilled 100%. It just does something for my soul, yeah. Prophecies.
Now, let's see, there have been particular people who have, told us the end of the earth was coming on March the 12th or
Right.
June the 8th. What's your take on the prophecy of the world coming to an end?
Well, I believe it's going to come to an end for sure, and that was one of the most exciting things that I learned when I was 23 years of age, that Jesus was actually going to come again, according to the Bible that I believe in. I knew there was going to be an end of the world as a child, but I didn't know that Jesus was going to come back to this earth. It just was so wonderful to me. So yes, I believe the world will come to an end, but I don't believe anybody can predict the time. That's the sad part of some of these prophecies that we've heard lately.
And so we live our lives the best we can, as long as we can. And
Yeah. Somebody wrote once, live as if you had 1,000 years, but as if maybe tomorrow's your last day or something like that. It's kind of the philosophy. Pretty good.
Do you consider yourself a happy and optimistic person?
Yeah, very much so, yeah. Everybody has their down days, but being a Christian, the overall trend of your life is one of peace, and being happily married helps. Having wonderful kids helps, but being a Christian is the most important part for me.
Do you find with your children that they've all got very distinct personalities? And
Absolutely. My two sons couldn't be any more the opposite. I mean, they could not be more opposite in their personalities. But yeah, very distinct. All their good traits they picked up from me, and the other ones, I don't know where they got them.
Well, good deal. I'm in favor of that. Do you see certain ills in society that distress you?
Yeah, there's a lot of ills that distress me. A family, for example, just came through this past weekend, not members of our local church, but members of our denomination, had a terrible wreck. 2 of their children are dead now. Those are some of the things that stress pastors and make us weep at night. But then there's the evil ills of society. It seems like the world is getting more rampant with serious problems, and I don't see that getting better for the time being.
We've sort of lost respect for life.
Yes.
People are just a commodity. That leads into, when I was a child, Dale Evans used to sing, "You gotta have faith, hope, and charity."
Oh, yeah.
And I loved that song because it was not only religious in nature, but it was kind of Western. It was kind of cowboyish. And my grandmother would say to me, "You've got to ride the train to the last stop." And I'd say, "What does that mean?" "Well, you've got to exercise enough faith that you can get on to the next stop, and to the next stop, and the next stop."
Right.
And she'd say, "Sometimes you can get off and look around, but you got to get back on the train, ride the train to the last stop." Faith, hope, and charity are sort of all together in the Bible, and yet in individual lives they're very specific. So could we talk about those for just a minute?
Faith, hope, and charity, sure.
Yes. Talk about faith as you see it and understand it.
Well, faith is something that really goes deep in your inner core of your being, I believe. It's something that it grows, and there's a text in the Bible that says, "Faith cometh by hearing, and hearing by the word." And I believe that that is a very true statement, because the more I immerse myself in good, positive reading, it doesn't have to be the Bible. That does a lot for my faith. But even other good literature that is uplifting really reinforces the strength of the strength of faith that I have. So yes, faith is something that keeps you motivating, keeps you going down the road. It really helps you during the hard times.
That's well said.
I was having experience with one of my children probably a year or two ago. It wasn't going real well for this particular child at this particular time, and I was out for a walk with the Lord and it was almost, now he's never spoken to me where I heard, but it was almost like he did. He says, "What does the Bible say about joy?" I said, "Well, it says to rejoice in the Lord always." And then it was almost immediately the question was, "Do you think that only means when things are going well?" And I said, "No, okay." So I started rejoicing right then and there, and my faith got better. My joy got better. Didn't immediately change the situations for my child. But usually most things do work out. So the more you live, the longer you live, I think the more your faith understands that, maybe, believes that.
I read the other day about a man whose father had abandoned him when he was 8 or 9. When he was 15, he began to pray to understand and forgive and all of those other things. And he didn't get a sense of anything from heaven, and so he just kind of set it aside and went on to other things. In his 30s, he was asked to give a talk in church about his mother. And he heard the voice say, "Don't talk about your mother, talk about your father." He said, "I can't talk about my father. I don't like my father. I don't have anything good to say." "Yeah, but talk about your father." While he was pondering that and going for a walk with the Lord, his 2 little boys tagged him out and just wanted to be his shadow and hang on to him and all those other sorts of things. And as he walked, he heard again an inner voice say, "Do you want to talk about the boy who lost the father, or do you want to talk about the father who lost the boy?" And he said in his little writing a few days later, I gave one of the better sermons I've ever given over all of
I
that.
bet he did. Wow.
How about hope, the role of hope in our lives?
Well, you ask about the conditions of the world, and it's hard sometimes to place hope upon this world as we are living in it, but the hope beyond this world is the one where I really put my stock in. Abraham was said of him that he put his hope in the world to come, and I think that's where my hope, most of my hope lies. Now, I have a lot of hope for mankind. I have a lot of hope for people I meet, and I try to encourage them with hope. If they have no hope, I try to encourage them to have hope, because there are reasons to have hope even in this world. But especially as you look long-term, eternal, there's reason to have hope.
And those who lose hope really lose nearly everything, it seems like.
Yeah. They begin to suffer in every way, physically, mentally, every way.
Well said.
Yeah.
Charity.
Well, that's the greatest of the three, right?
It is.
Faith, hope, and charity. Charity, and of course there's huge misconceptions about charity or love, the other way to say that word. There's so much of the world now places emphasis on what they say is love, and it certainly isn't the love that I understand from the Bible, at least. Love is a principle. I love my wife for 43 years. I've had to love her in principle sometimes. I've loved her with my heart, and my emotions, and my feelings. There's been a couple times I had to love her in principle, and I'm sure she's had to do that many times with me. But I think that love is much more than just a feeling, much more than emotions. Sometimes it's even a choice. I choose to love you because it's the right thing to do. I may not even feel good about you, but I choose to love you, and I'm going to show you love, even though you may not be showing me much love. I still choose to love you.
My mother told me when I was a teenager that I couldn't become a truly godlike person until I could love the people I didn't like. And I remember thinking to myself, ooh, that'll be hard to do.
I've heard you refer to your parents many times in some of our meetings, and it sounds like you had very godly parents.
I did. I did. Do you see a difference between religion, organized religion, and just spirituality in people?
Unfortunately, yeah, there's sometimes a wide gap there, because you can have people doing all kinds of religious things, even worship type things, and then go out and kill people. I mean, we're having that in our world today. Our greatest wars have been fought over religion. I don't think wars are being fought over true Christianity. I think it's being fought over religion. And so there's a huge, it shouldn't be. I think being religious should be being a Christian, but too often the gap's pretty wide.
Do you have a favorite story in the Bible?
Boy. I don't know if I have a favorite story. Let's see.
While you think about it for just
Yeah.
a minute, as I was thinking about questions that I could ask you, I grew up in a home where every night before prayers, the stories were read to us out of a little book that wasn't the Bible. It's somebody's take on the stories. And I loved the Bible stories. These
Yes.
men and women were all heroes and heroines and great, great people. And I've found in my later life that I've relied on those on more than one occasion. Is there a favorite instance or scripture?
I love the Old Testament figures, the patriarchs and prophets. They were amazing to read about. Samson, he's kind of like some of your modern day preachers that you hear about nowadays. It seems like a lot of our preachers today are coming out of these terrible lives. They were drug addicts, And there's a favorite story I like to tell, that I think the true heroes today are people maybe like you, because you came out of a good, solid home. This pastor was living next door in a community next door to his fellow pastor friend, and so he invited him to his church to preach one weekend, and said, "Oh, I'll be glad to do it," back in the days of the horse and buggy. So he got up real early that morning. He was traveling down the road, and he wasn't paying much attention. The horse got a little too close to the edge of this narrow place in the road, and the wheel slipped off, down went the carriage, down went the horse, and the preacher went overboard, and he was just barely able to grab a hold of this branch, and he pulled himself up, and he got up, and he was just filthy, and his clothes were torn. He walks the rest of the way, and the pastor comes out to greet him, and he says, "Man, what happened to you?" He said, "Well, I got to tell you a tremendous miracle." He said, "It just happened to me." And so he tells the whole story, how he just was able to grab hold of that branch sticking out from the side of the cliff. And the other preacher says, "Well, I got a better story than that, a bigger miracle than that." He says, "You do? What's that?" He says, "Well, I've been by that road many times, and I never fell off the edge." And I think the young people that grow up in Christian homes and never go out and sow their wild oats, I think theirs are the biggest miracles. They go on to do wonderful things for the Lord, and sometimes we give too much credit to the other. I'm glad they all come back from those drugs and those terrible days, but I would have given anything to come. I had a good home, but I have come from a Christian home where I would never wanted to stray. I would have been better yet, I think.
Do you spend a lot of time in study and prayer and
Yes.
contemplation?
Yes, I do, but not enough, of course, I bet. But I love to read the Bible, and I love to read other books that support the Bible. I do a lot of that. I used to do more. I'm in a church now where there's 4 of us pastors, and so I don't preach every week, and that's been a refreshing change in a way. I thought maybe I would really miss it, but now I get to study for myself a little bit more than I used to. Every time before, it seemed like I was studying to put together a sermon or a prayer meeting or something. Now when I have time to study, I get to study for myself, and I like that.
When you're preparing to give a sermon, are you following your heart or something that has happened recently that prods you, or how do you choose?
It's a variety of ways, but I'd say quite often comes from my reading. I had a professor in college say once, and I think it's very true, that if you begin to feel the well running dry, I can almost assure you you're not reading enough. And so you go back to reading, and you're just inspired with something, and it always kind of fits with what's happening around you too often. So it's amazing how God works in that way.
It is.
Yeah.
Now, how did you come to the interfaith work specifically in Sacramento?
Well, when I moved here, part of our church, the Sacramento Central Church, has been involved with the Interfaith Bureau here for quite some time. We have programs that are on RCCTV, and so it was just part of my job responsibility, I guess you'd say, to be part of this board when I first got here. And I got so busy I wasn't on it for a little while, but then I started coming regularly, and it kind of grabs you and you stay, and I've been on it for quite a while now.
Now, talking about RCCTV, what's the role of electronic media, do you think, in organized religion these days?
Well, it's a huge role. You can't, if you bypass that, you're really bypassing a big thing. I think if we could get more churches in the area taking advantage of RCCTV, they would be the ones that would be amazed. It's been a blessing to our congregation. We have people visiting us all the time that have viewed our programs, and so it's a tool that if you aren't using, you're losing. Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate the pitch there. Do you see a good future for the state of California?
You know, that's an amazing question. It's kind of a hard question, because if you read the Bible, there's not a real good picture of the whole world. And so, in some ways, I always remain optimistic about my country, about my state, about the county I live in, the city I live in. But realistically, you look around, things keep gradually getting a little worse. And that's unfortunately how the Bible says it's going to be, so I kind of waver back and forth on that.
Do we get to be involved in slowing the decline by trying to do good works for
I
good
think
sake?
so. I think so, yeah. Although it's very interesting, Jesus never spent a lot of time on trying to cure the social ills. He focused upon the spiritual, and if you get that right, then you're going to help the other automatically, I think. So that's where I think we all need to put our time, getting man right with their Maker.
That's a nice way to say that.
Yeah.
Where do you see yourself in 10 more years?
Oh, I'll be getting pretty old by then, John. 65 now, I'll be 75, but I'll probably still be in Sacramento if I am alive and well. I'll be here, I hope. Whether I'll be working full-time, I don't know. Couldn't say. I hope to work 5 more years at least, full-time.
Do you have a specific cause in your central church that is near and dear to your heart?
Well, I just came from the pantry. It's open every Wednesday, and the number of people coming, it increases every week. There's a lot of hurting people in this world, in our state, in our city. So yes, we as churches need to do more, I think, for the down and out. There's a lot of down and out people right now.
Is, in a biblical term, almsgiving a honorable and good and decent thing, or is there a better way?
I don't know that there's a better way that I've found or understood of as of now, but almsgiving will always, Jesus said the poor will always be with us, so it's got to be part of our makeup, I think.
And some are poor in spirit, and some are
Yes.
poor in the flesh.
Yes.
Now, do you think the next generations, the generation of your grandchildren, will they feel as strongly about being a child of God as we do?
Well, I sure hope so, but they have more to contend with than you and I had, and that's what makes me sad too. It's harder for them. The world grabs them and hangs on for all of its might, it seems like, and we as churches need to do the same thing for our young people. Grab onto them and hold on to with all of our mights, because the pull of the world is strong.
My mother thought the Beatles were a plague. She didn't like the long hair and the loud music and all of those other sorts of things. And then a few years went by and they began to write things that were prettier and softer and gentler. And all of a sudden she found like they were doing some pretty good music.
Yeah.
Now, if you could wave a magic wand in your life and you could make some particular part of society disappear so that we would be better, what would that be?
Well, I think if we could do away with things that affect people's minds, by way of drugs and maybe even alcohol, things that really affect minds of people negatively, that would help society 500% overnight.
A man told me once, don't forget, whatever goes into the mind can't come out.
Yeah, that's a good saying.
Thank you for being with us.
Thank you,
It's
John.
been a pleasure to visit with you.
You too.
Pastor Harold White from the Adventist community in Sacramento. Thanks so much.
Thank you.